going. All right. So before I kick it off to Lora and Angie, I've got a few bits of housekeeping to cover. So if you could advance the slide. HathiTrust does have a code of conduct that we expect all of our participants to adhere to, whether in person or virtual event. You can see it here as well as on our website, and my colleague Graham will be pasting it into the chat as well. Next slide, please. Few bits of technology. You have all entered the room here. You are muted and your audio is off as well as your video. So please remain that way so we can minimize distractions for everyone who is attending. We are recording the session. Transcription is available. You can turn that on the bottom of your Zoom screen there if that's something that you need. There is also a chance to get help if you need help. Graham will be monitoring chat. So if you run into any issues, just shoot him a text there and he will give you a hand. Next slide, please. We will be sharing this recording and the slides in the future. But as I said, if you have questions, put them in the chat. This is a more redundant slide, but we'll move on from that. And finally, please give us a shout out on social media if you are using it. You can add us at HathiTrust, use this hashtag, keep the conversation going. And we are also inviting you to play HathiTrust Bingo. We have some swag that we would love to send you if you are able to get 4 across or 4 down. So link for that is coming as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lora and Angie. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. This is Angie Ohler, and I'll be starting us out on this presentation today. We'll be discussing the context in which we considered a membership for HathiTrust, including some of the expectations and experiences that framed when and how we started our new membership, our pre-membership preparation, our goals and timeline for internal communications, the actions taken to make sure our outreach, research, and instruction were successful, our strategies for external communications, and then the results of our PR and training activities. And then, of course, we're going to have some time for questions and discussion. We'll start by discussing some of the background and timeline in which we were considering a membership for HathiTrust, why this went forward as it did, and how we were able to capitalize on both some changes in leadership and changes in our collection strategy to really build toward a better service for our users in terms of their expectations and the experience. Our goal for acquiring a membership in HathiTrust was very much within the context of reframing our collection strategy. But more importantly, it was also about how to reframe our users' perceptions of the libraries, our collections, and our services. We all know that when our communities view our services and collections, it can often be the case that rightly or wrongly, perception is reality. So with past decisions to reduce collections, some due to skyrocketing inflation and journal costs, and then later due to budget cuts per the pandemic, many faculty had formulated negative perceptions of the libraries, particularly those in areas experiencing journal cancellations, and combined with decisions to reduce and then keep monograph spending flat to reallocate those funds towards saving journals. Many faculty felt the libraries no longer supported fields of study that depended on the monograph for teaching and research. This perception was also based in faculty reactions, frankly, to the library's new offsite storage facility, which went into operation in 2018, and unfortunately was viewed by some faculty as the books no longer being as accessible as they had been on the shelves of the main library on campus. Combined then with the pandemic and the worldwide lack of access to physical library collections, the impact on those subject and research areas that were heavily dependent on monographs really led to a general perception that the libraries always say no and doesn't support faculty who rely on books. Our goal was to improve that overall perception of the libraries, our collections, and our services, but particularly those of faculty who wanted to use our collections. First, we implemented a new collection structure in which the larger collections budget was managed through a centralized collection strategy unit, who viewed its purpose as giving our liaison librarians with the subject matter expertise the data they needed to make decisions about their budgets effectively. Second, we used the data and input from our liaisons to prioritize the collections we wanted to purchase as a wish list, careful to highlight those collections that would support monograph-heavy disciplines. Third, we were successful in marshaling that data and the list to advocate for the largest increase in collections funding that the libraries had had in many years. And finally, we decided we needed a long-term strategy of publicizing our wins for collections, marketing them to our campus audience of administrators, faculty, and students by highlighting in particular those resources that enabled faculty and students to have greater access to areas in which we'd previously not collected or where we were not seen as collecting enough. Although a membership in HathiTrust had been considered for many years, the context in which decisions were being made to move forward had changed dramatically. Over a period of 3 years, the University of Arkansas Libraries had some extreme leadership changes, including 2 new associate deans hired in the fall of 2020 by a relatively new dean of libraries who left shortly after that, an interim dean from the neighboring Honors College for the first half of 2021, and then another new dean of libraries beginning in August 2021. These changes in leadership, combined with coming to grips with any budget reductions due to the pandemic, stalled a lot of decisions within the libraries, including the one to move forward with HathiTrust. Ironically, the delays in leadership changes ended up being a benefit as 2 new deans and the associate deans came on board. They all had experience with a HathiTrust membership and knew how valuable it had been during the pandemic to those institutions who were members and could call upon the Emergency Temporary Access Service, ETAS, to provide their patrons access to digitized monographs in lieu of physical collections. Further, as the new Associate Dean for Content and Digital Initiatives, I began to work more closely with the Collection Development Strategies personnel, the library's budget office, personnel, the liaison librarians, university procurement, and the Office of General Counsel. And one thing became clear, there needed to be a better understanding of how licensing and procurement for libraries were different from the typical campus procurement. One area in which our possible HathiTrust membership had gotten caught was the degree to which campus procurement, legal counsel, campus IT didn't fully understand how HathiTrust and other community membership like it were very different. These were different sorts of resource purchases from the standard library online resource. With a new dean on board and after many conversations between procurement, legal counsel, and campus administration, the libraries were finally able to negotiate independent procurement authority up to a certain limit. This meant membership in library community initiatives like HathiTrust were easier to move forward with. These delays also allowed us the time to plan for the implementation of HathiTrust, including a lot of pre-purchase preparation, which resulted in HathiTrust really benefiting from our overall collections marketing campaign strategies. And I'll turn it over to Lora.
Thank you. I am calling this pre-membership preparation because I have been at this university for a number of years. And one of the reasons I became a librarian was my curiosity about everything. I had taught English, I've taught various things within the library setting. And so I wanted to look at what I could do to help prepare us for the inevitability of text mining, as well as HathiTrust. Could you please change the slide? Thank you. So I took advantage of as much programming that were available from the different, from HathiTrust, from HTRC. And I've also got a group together called the Huge Manatees, and got 9 people together to do some text mining and to play with text mining in various settings. So we were trying to build up our skill set. I needed to build up my skill set for sure. So I did use any programming that was available at HathiTrust. And I have to say, I tried for a while, it seems, to get into an HTRC virtual workshop. And we weren't members. And I kept saying, well, we're going to be members. So I eventually got into one, and it was a fabulous experience, really well done, lots of great resources that I was given. And I continue to use those resources to help inform my practice with the students and users and faculty of our institution. So that was our first thing, was getting that started well before we even got the membership. I think it's now for you, Angie.
Great, thanks. Well, really a part of our pre-membership preparation, it's perhaps important really to stress some of the internal communications we deliberately engaged in order to make sure we were ready to publicize HathiTrust as a new resource. As the new Associate Dean for Content and Digital Initiatives, I met monthly with the library's Director of Public Relations to help frame our communications, both internally and externally, about collections. These meetings really became integral to the timing of navigating when we were ready to move forward with publicizing any new resource, either internally or externally. For HathiTrust, our procurement process began with the new budget year in July 2021. It didn't finish until we had a new dean on board to help us with pushing for that independent procurement authority and the ability to move forward with community memberships ourselves. And I was finally able to sign off on the HathiTrust license in December 2021. During the fall of 2021, we brought the HathiTrust resource as a purchase in process to our collection development assembly. This group met every 6 weeks and included all of our liaison librarians and any other library personnel who have collection development responsibilities or work that is related to collections outreach in any way. These meetings were a time to discuss collection strategies and specific resources. HathiTrust was of interest to many, particularly those in disciplines relying on monographic works. We asked library personnel to start experimenting with HathiTrust, and then at that time, it was only the openly accessible material, since we'd not yet fully set up our authentication and had full access, because we really wanted to see kind of how and if it might help their faculty. By January of 2022, we finally had all the pieces in place with licensing and procurement and billing, and we were waiting on the authentication setup. It's really vital that all of these things be set up before those external communications, because at the end of the day, you know, how many times have you launched something and it's not quite ready yet, and you know that can really go awry really fast. So we wanted to avoid that. The final step for internal communication was really kind of advertising the resource to ourselves. So as Lora was building the LibGuide and training courses, she was offering them first internally to library personnel. And we included announcements about the training sessions in our internal bulletin once a week. It's called the Tuesday Times, which again helped us with making sure that everyone in the libraries knew about this new resource and had a chance to work with it first before our public launch. And I'll turn it back over to Lora.
Thank you. Next slide, please. One of my goals that I've had throughout my career is whenever we build something new, to be as prepared as possible. So I can't not indicate that there was some sticky stuff we had to work through. The web librarian and myself worked together to time everything so that we were ensured that authentication was working out. And one of our main questions really also was, how do we have people who, like myself, had gone ahead and registered as a friend of Michigan and started playing with Hathi at a much longer ago, and then also had an HTRC account. How did you merge those accounts? And luckily, there's really great information that we were able to gather on the sites so that we could help guide people through those processes. And we haven't had any comments of that being a difficulty from any of our users at this point. So we wanted to be sure everything was laid solid and that the questions, we could answer the questions. Next slide, please. So the first thing I started working on, and I did this as we were in the process of trying to buy HathiTrust membership, was to create a LibGuide or a reference guide. And I have to say, I steal from everybody's guides. One of the great things about being in this profession is the ability for everyone to collaborate. And so there are some great materials. And I have to say, I take pieces and parts from different institutions to try to put them together. And I created a guide that, and I'm the data librarian, but you can't analyze the data. Oh, you can do some, but oftentimes people are wanting to analyze the data from the collections they have created. And so you have to get the whole thing in line. And so this guide started at, what is HathiTrust, the terms of use, and logging in and dealing with previous accounts, and then moves through finding and searching with screenshots, reading, citing, downloading, creating a collection, and then moves into the different types of analyses that you can do, and to links to the materials available on the HathiTrust and HathiTrust Research Center's sites. So I was able to encompass their materials as well as the materials from other institutions to create a reference guide. And I mentioned there that I'm the data librarian, but to me, gathering your data is as important as analyzing it. And that's one of the reasons I was indeed the person creating the guide. Next slide, please. One other thing that I have developed before we launched HathiTrust was I had a data and software calendar. And this is where anything that we're teaching that has to do with R, Python, Git, and GIS, and things like the Fred Economic Database from the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis, or Statista, or all the other software that we use that people would want to use for working with data, mining data, etc. All those classes are put in one calendar. And the tool that I'm using is SpringShare. And the calendar allows people to see everything about the class, register for the class, and I'm sending out registration reminders. And I can also link guides and other sites to my registration process so that people can get a flow of information before they come to a session and have access to all the help guides and materials I need to do. I'm also, this particular calendar is being utilized now by the High Performance Computing Center and our IT, research IT community as well. So we're including all those classes together. And the great thing about it is that we're communicating in a way that we are embedding this material in all of our sites so that all of our different levels of researchers have, as well as, not just researchers, top researchers, but also those undergraduate researchers can see from various places where they might be able to take advantage of classes we offer. And this is very helpful because we're getting a community of spirit, as it were. Now, I mentioned in the language that DART is involved, and DART, I had to write down what it meant because I can never remember what the acronym means. Data analytics that are robust and trusted is a grant that we received that encompasses all of Arkansas higher educational institutions that deal with research. And so I became involved with doing basic training for things for this data, this research NSF grant that we got. And so actually they get this information as well. And the kicker to that is that meant that people from other institutions who may not be members to HathiTrust were signing up for our classes as well. And luckily, HathiTrust is a tool that one can use in a membership mode, or also if you're a free member, as it were. And so we were able to encompass all the topics, even to people who are not at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Also, I should mention all my classes were online, mainly because of our connection with other institutions, trying to bring out the word of our training. So that we have been doing that, especially since COVID. Next slide, please. So here's the calendar in situ, as it were. I have a guide that goes around it. And what I have done is I write a blurb for each class that is offered. So HathiTrust is under the data skills session. And so all of our courses having to do with that have a complete blurb of what the course session means, as well as the dates that it can, it is operating. And this, unfortunately, July 2022, we don't have any classes scheduled right now, but this is where people can register directly on the public calendar. And that same calendar is embedded elsewhere. Next slide. The classes, and I'm sorry, I did not catch a typo on this as I've looked at it many times, but I didn't see it. We offered 2 different classes, Introduction to HathiTrust and Basic Text Mining using HathiTrust. And first, I performed them as it were. No, I had interactive sessions with the persons within the library itself, because I think if we're going to offer a product, it's good for as many of us to know about the product and touch it and feel it and get a sense for it. And I have to say, people are very interested in our libraries on text mining, especially our staff. So it was open not only to librarians, but any staff who wanted to learn more about the processes that you go through and in using HathiTrust and HathiTrust Research Center as well. And that was to help me provide, seeing if my concepts of how it's going to teach it for public were going to work. Does this kind of model for teaching work, which means, working them through a process of creating a collection and then utilizing that collection. And I wanted to be sure that I'm giving right kinds of information that will be understandable to external persons external to the library staff and faculty. So then I offered 2 classes for our users. I think that's it. So it's now Angie.
So by now you have a sense of the internal planning and the communications that were so important for our ultimate success as far as our external communications, but we'd like to stress how important it is that that external communication piece not be overlooked. While many libraries are definitely in the habit of announcing new resources on their library website or through email communications targeted to specific units or faculty groups, or even through library-specific newsletters produced and marketed from the libraries toward campus audiences. More libraries can and should make a conscious effort to announce important information through a common campus-wide and very public venue. In our case, the University of Arkansas News is the campus's internal daily newsletter. It's pushed to the email of every campus community member, and it's often how units across campus highlight important accomplishments, announce training, or request feedback on campus surveys. It's also openly accessible since the stories are published online and available like an online newspaper, meaning the impact of the featured stories goes beyond the campus. Knowing that many of our faculty, campus administrators, statewide partners, and donors pay attention to this publication venue, we decided early on that announcing our membership in HathiTrust was a smart move. The goal of the story had to be a quick read at the top level and without a lot of detail, like an elevator pitch. When framing collections related stories for campus, we wanted to focus first on the Witham principle, what's in it for me, why should I care? That school of thinking. In this case, we needed to convey why this membership was important, which we did by highlighting how the ETAS had helped HathiTrust member libraries connect their library researchers to digital versions of print works that were unavailable during the pandemic. We then also highlighted the number of volumes available to users and the possibilities for advanced research and data mining. We were also careful to feature links to Lora's research guide and the virtual training sessions. Further, once the story ran more publicly, we also circled back to our internal audience by highlighting it again in our next Tuesday Times library newsletter. And our liaisons pushed the campus story out and started training sessions to faculty who had previously expressed a desire for the libraries to have a membership in HathiTrust, or who had previewed it earlier before the authentication was fully set up. We also used the story to continue some of our discussions statewide with different groups who were interested in hearing about it. And we're thinking about it as a possible sort of statewide membership, if that were possible through HathiTrust.
I don't know if these are exactly results, but to tell you how, to be honest about what our successes have been with this. Next slide, please. There is interest. We have definitely sparked more interest in the product and increased the knowledge about it, because again, as one person sees it, they speak with another, and that's really the best communication, is between colleagues who are talking about what they can and cannot do, what they can work with, etc. So I think we got some really great feedback and positive responses, both in email and just in passing conversations in the hall. I think we've all seen that kind of thing happen. And indeed, in particular, our fine arts librarian and our history librarian were pushing HathiTrust, and had a number of people in their departments who had used it before in other instances or other locations. So that is good. I had received emails from people who could not attend the sessions that were scheduled, saying, how can I learn more? And I would give them, the guide and give them a little information about it. And there were a lot of people saying they regret they couldn't, but will be coming to future ones as we do them again. And finally, we had those comments again, as I mentioned, of people who've used it at other institutions and were glad that they were able to use it fully at our institution. Next slide, please. The classes. Well, classes are classes. And even if we're doing it online, snow days affect us, especially to our institution. A snow day is a snow day, and many people then do not participate even in online activities or committee meetings, etc., because of that. So we did have snow, and it wasn't this tall, though this picture is from Arkansas, southern Arkansas. But we did have snow, and that kind of curtailed attendance to some extent. But I keep in contact with the people who did register, as well as the people who did attend, and make that stuff available to those people. But the interesting thing is who attended these classes. It wasn't a huge quantity of people, I will admit. However, the people were from English, expected, business, okay, journalism definitely also kind of expected for the topics they're looking up, but even the sciences, people were coming in from chemistry, saying they're just kind of interested to see what's out there and what's in HathiTrust. And it's interesting that you would have that interest in some of these other disciplines. And then I had individuals who had attended other sessions we've done in DART that that NSF grant. And so I had people from other campuses in the University of Arkansas. So I had to just change my training a little bit to give them an idea of what you can do as a non-member versus what we can do as a member, so that both groups are being taught similar things. And luckily, there's a lot of stuff people can do, and they were very grateful. I have one person who's attended my Python, my R, my GitHub, and HathiTrust. So this is wonderful that we can get those types and all the people from around the state. Next slide, please. Our future planning, there's lots of future planning. I want to continue providing these regular trainings as part of our data series, and I continue to do these trainings also for individuals in the library. We have populations changing. I think we all have that at this time. And so it's good to get people involved and keep them going. We are also looking at a building renovation. We're planning for a digital humanities and visualization lab, which means we want to be able to have products and services and tools that people can use. And certainly HathiTrust will be built in to whatever we're thinking of as far as the planning for that space. We have increased interest we want to increase more interest in knowledge in our library staff, again, providing them with the tools, again, to try to do the kind of analysis and understanding of the analysis they're doing. I'd like to and I called it plug and play, but really it's the idea of having modules that we can, I'm developing those modules where we can take something to a different course and say to the English faculty, this is a kind of module we can do with your students using HathiTrust and HathiTrust Research Center, and we can build assignments or a kind of a talk or seminar series for individual classes. So I would like to do that, and then do whatever I can. I'm a video librarian, kind of, not really, but I do that here at the University of Arkansas. And so I'd like to have some modules that people can just click on and see a video about it and talk about what we can do for them. And I believe that is it for us. Discussion. Are there any questions or any comments?
I'm going to stop sharing so that I can actually see the screen.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are there different ways of communicating with the different audiences, sort of the actual channels themselves that are more effective? So ways that you have talked about HathiTrust with faculty versus students. Maybe you could speak to that a bit.
I know Laura will say much more about how to interact with students and faculty. I just want to throw in there the importance of communicating kind of to campus administrators, which is a very different kind of communication. And so that really needs to be much more that top level elevator speech kind of communication. That's why it was so important that we did a very public story about this joining HathiTrust for campus. And go ahead, Laura, because I know there's many differences.
Well, there are differences. And I have to say our particular population of students, unless they actually have a reason to do something at the time, don't tend to sign up for some of these extra sessions. And that's why I want to build things through the faculty members, because the faculty members understood. They knew what they could get out of HathiTrust. They just wanted to have practice and tools and have someone there walking them through the activities, but it's the students, they don't understand necessarily unless they have an instructor who's giving them some clues about good things to do or good things to try. And that's why I want to build in these sessions for different departments where we can do some of that. Now, that's not necessarily true for upper level undergrads or for graduate students, but again, my attendees were primarily faculty and a few graduate students. That answered.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if people have questions, you feel free to put it in the chat, or I think we're a small enough group now that you could unmute and ask questions of Angie and Lora yourself. There's one coming in from Sharon. Have you had any faculty use HathiTrust for classroom student projects so far?
Not that I know of. That's why I want to try to build that connection this fall. I think they were interested this spring in seeing what they could do with it and what they might bring to the classes. But as far as I know, I don't know that we have anyone having done that yet. So that's definitely a building block piece.
We did, Lora, we did have one informal feedback from one of Phil's faculty who did say this would be fine arts, who did say that he had used it in his course and was super appreciative of having access to it. So that, I don't know, that might be a place to start.
Another one from Erin. How do you generate interest in HathiTrust Research Center among those who feel they lack tech skills?
Well, I think the great part of HathiTrust and HathiTrust Research Center is the fact that the tools will do some of the stuff for you so that you can start learning as you're learning the concepts of what you're trying to do in your text analysis. There are tools built in for you to get started with it. And also, as you're going as a member, going into the full environment, that's where we're providing Python classes and things like that at the same time. So people can get more comfortable with coding and with using code to do their activities. So I think of them all as one big bundle, and that's why we're teaching them as a big bundle, as it were, to get people feeling more comfortable with coding, with more comfortable also with what techniques you would use, the terms, because I think that's really the confusion, what do they mean by latent direct link? I can't even pronounce it, analysis. And so getting people to feel more comfortable with what they're trying to do and then seeing it applied. So it is a little hard stretch for some people. Some people, it's not a stretch really at all once they get started with learning basic tools of coding. Thank you, Erin. I guess I will also say I have a separate text and mining guide as well that goes through the definitions of those terms for people. Then I provide to people as well, so that they understand what really are the activities that are being acted on for them. And that's where the research center workshop I took had such great stuff to help me explain that those content items to people who are new to it.
Let's see, Allison asks, is most of the training carried out by you or data services team, or also by liaisons?
Well, I am the data services team, and I'm doing it for the liaisons at this point. I'm hoping that the idea of the Huge Manatees group was that we could get more people involved and out there in the classroom teaching. So I have a few people who are on the edge, they're not feeling quite comfortable yet, but I think that they're moving into it as well because they've gone through a lot of different training on it. So I know they're interested. It's just they're not quite comfortable yet themselves. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable with it yet myself, but I certainly know that I understand more of it than the people I'm working with. So oftentimes, so something we all have to think about. Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
The more you do it, the more you teach it. You have to know more to teach it. So
Sure.
I always recommend that people I'm working with actually go out and do it. And do it with teaching and understand the flaws of their own thinking and as they're trying to explain it.
Exactly.
Good point.
Don't see any more questions coming in at the moment, but folks could be thinking.
I didn't have any questions, but I take a bunch of history classes. So we were doing some research on like Black cowboys in the West and the portrayals and everything that associated with the West, basically. So HathiTrust was one place where we could go to find a lot of information, and then just share where we found it and try to promote it for more people to keep searching on there, because it's a great tool, a lot of knowledge. And then we also use it like genealogy. We have a genealogy at lunch that we can find a lot of resources there that we couldn't find other places.
Definitely.
And that is usually, that's one hook I bring people into, is the genealogy piece and finding materials in that way. And I demonstrate something from my own genealogy in a presentation. So I think that's a lovely way, a lovely hook to bring people in, because they all kind of feel it anyway. They want to do that. So yeah, those are great ideas. And those saved searches that everyone else can use, the collections that people build. Now, sometimes you have to understand that sometimes there are people who are building these collections that really are just playing and testing, but there are some good collections out there for you to use, especially when you're doing training and teaching, so that if you don't want to have people create their own list at a time, to use something else, that's a way to get around that. And there are some very good ones. And I love your leaves.
Yes.
Thank you. That's here in Nebraska.
Awesome.
At our it's kind of like a botanical garden down by our zoo.
Oh, awesome. Great. They have very big leaves.
All right. Well, it looks like we have absorbed all the expertise of the moment. So thank you all very much for presenting here and for attending. We will be sending out the recording and the slides. We'll stay on here for a few minutes longer in case anybody has additional questions. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.